Welcome to the Jeff Crilly Show. And now, here's Jeff Crilly.
Welcome back to the Jeff Crilly Show. My next guest, she actually wears two hats. She is a crisis communications expert as well as a legal expert. I'm going to give you her websites, CanterburyCommunications.com and HighEnergyLitigation.com. Chrysta Castañeda, welcome to the Jeff Crilly Show.
Hi, nice to be here.
Okay, I don't want to embarrass you, but you did just win one of the largest verdicts in Texas history. Tell us about that.
Well, yes, I just tried a big oil and gas case in Pecos, Texas for 3.5 weeks on behalf of T. Boone Pickens, and we won a $146 million verdict.
Oh, my goodness. Did you get a high five from T. Boone Pickens?
Yes, he was very pleased with the result and deserved it.
That's got to feel good. Well, I have to imagine that, going into a community like Pecos, it's a smaller community. You're a big Dallas attorney. How do you navigate that and become connected to the jury?
Interesting question. You start in voir dire, or some people call it voir dire. It's when you're interviewing the jurors to be on the jury. You have a whole range of people out there, and you want to find the ones that will help your case and exclude the ones that will not help your case, and the other side's trying to do the same thing. So you try to personalize yourself when you're talking to those jurors, and Pecos had just been admitted to the Texas State Marching Band Championships. So I grew up in a small town, and I was a drum major, and so I used a little bit of that to ask some people about their experiences that way and instill some community pride. And so you just try to find little moments to bond with them.
I think that's genius.
Well, it's what trial lawyers are trained to do.
So you can be a small town girl when you want to.
Well, I grew up a small town girl.
I love it. Now, the other side of your life, you have a crisis communications company. Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, I found that trial lawyers and appellate lawyers, too, for that matter, and Scott's one of the finest in the state. I have to recommend him to anybody who's listening. They don't necessarily know how to talk to the media, and their clients may not know how to talk to the media about litigation matters and about crisis that might happen in a business. And there's a natural divide between lawyers who are very conservative and don't want to give away what they know about the situation, and the media's need to understand what the case is about and what the public might want to understand about it. So I bridge that gap between the lawyers and the media in explaining what the case is about or what the crisis is about in a way, hopefully, that the public can help.
And that's so important. You and I have kind of shared the stage together a couple of times with the Dallas Bar, giving a continuing legal education class on dealing with the media. And one of the things that has always struck me about lawyers is that they don't offer media class to lawyers,
right.
And so they're not really trained to give their client necessarily the best advice.
That's correct. I think every lawyer should know how to deal with the media, especially if you're handling litigation matters. But even if you're handling big deals, you need to know when the media calls, you do three things. You say, what's your deadline? What's your story about? And who have you talked to? And I'll take down your name and number, and I will get back to you. Then you call your client and you talk about it with them. And even if all you do is call back and say, we're not going to give a statement at this time, at least you've made friends with the media and you've done your client a service.
Absolutely. Well, I know we all remember the BP oil spill and the then CEO going on television saying, I'd like my life back. Disastrous public relations, wasn't it?
It was, and unfortunately, it was a very human moment that he just let slip. He was obviously exhausted and frustrated and had been under the gun for a long period of time. But really, when you're dealing with the media, they need to hear what your message is about the situation that you're dealing with, and you need to kind of stay on that message so that your point gets across.
So when you're dealing with a client on the legal side, are you having to persuade them, hey, we may need to work with the media on this story? It's a high-profile case.
Frequently, yes.
And are they receptive?
Well, once you explain that things will come off better for them in the public arena if they are prepared to make a comment about their side of the case. It doesn't have to be a lot. It just has to explain their position briefly. Then they can understand it. But it's just getting them over that fear factor of actually having to say something to scary reporters.
And, you know, you and I have talked about this off the air before. There are some attorneys here in town who are brilliant at using the media to get their message out. And in some cases, I'll call it pull the pin on the hand grenade. I'm holding a news conference, and all the media is here, and I'm going to go ahead and start to try this case.
Correct. And frequently it's the plaintiff's side of the case that will do that because they can start to get their story out early in the process and hopefully start to persuade people, which is what you do both in the media and in the trial law world.
One of the most famous cases that everybody was watching was the O.J. case. You had both sides that I think were using the media. As you kind of digest that case, and that was a while ago, you know, who won that media battle?
Oh, wow. I'm not sure, and it's still going on, right?
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
There's still people talking about it and running shows on it, and
right?
It's still being retraded, and it was a great historical moment.
You had Marcia Clark and you had Johnny Cochran, and I think they were both very skilled at using the media.
Yes, and frequently, though, when you're actually in the trial, the judge will impose, if not an actual gag order, a de facto gag order, meaning the judge will strongly indicate to you that you should not be speaking to the media while the jury's seated and deliberating on the case.
Wow.
So sometimes you're under that constraint as well.
Okay, so back to your legal practice. You specialize in oil and gas, is that right?
I specialize in anything that's commercial litigation that has a technical aspect to it. I'm trained as an engineer, and I really like digging into anything that has a technical base to it. So yes, oil and gas, but I've done all kinds of other cases that involve the work of technical experts.
How do you come by new clients, or do they hear about you? How do you get new business?
Referrals, a lot of repeat business. When you're involved in the aspect of law that I'm involved in, my clients tend to face litigation matters over and over again, so you'll encounter repeat issues. But a lot of networking as well, you know, having lunch with Scott at Capitol Grill, maybe something will come up in his mind that he needs to refer me to.
Well, I also have to believe that getting those headlines on the T. Boone Pickens lawsuit, that doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt, although I will say it's pretty unusual to have a case that is of such strong media interest. I've had a few in my life, and it's always fun when that happens. But a lot of courtroom stuff goes on without the public's notice. And really, it would be fabulous if we could get more enthusiasm for good court reporting, because it's a very, very difficult thing to do for reporters to actually handle cases well and report on really what should be of interest to the citizenry generally.
Have you tried cases where you do have the media there every day
Yes.
taking notes? Is that intimidating for you as a lawyer?
Well, I'm trying to communicate to the jury just the same way I'm trying to communicate my client's case to the reporters if they're in the room, and so you're really very focused on the task at hand, which is cross-examining that witness or making that argument. Or so no, it's not particularly intimidating. It's just one more audience.
How do you feel about cameras in the courtroom? There's lots of discussion about whether or not there'll be showboating and playing to the public. Is it a good idea or a bad idea?
I think the judge has a lot of control over those elements. I think it would be a good idea, generally speaking, to allow cameras into the courtroom with some limitations for sensitive cases. There are some cases where, just due to the nature of the subject matter, it wouldn't be appropriate. You know, there are cases involving, for example, sexual assaults or something
Right.
like that. You wouldn't allow free media in a case like that. But when it's a commercial case, or people are interested, then generally speaking, I think the public has a right to know. We have a constitutional right to open courts.
Right. And it seems like the public is more fascinated than ever before about the inside the courtroom. I mean, you just turn on HBO and any one of these shows, and they're dissecting a murder from 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah. I mean, people do love legal drama, right? You know, and probably if you did allow TVs into the courtroom more frequently, you'd probably get a lot more material for those cases. but you got to balance it with the fact that the jury is not supposed to have any access to outside influence. So you don't want the jury seeing anything on the television, and that would be a challenge.
Right. Well, listen, we're out of town for this segment. Can we have you back?
Sure.
You're awesome. Give us both of your websites one more time.
Sure. highenergylitigation.com and canterburycommunications.com.
Outstanding. Thank you for being on the Jeff Crilley Show. Coming up next, a Dallas fashion designer who is changing the fabric of the industry one stitch at a time. The story behind silk threads is just ahead.
More of the Jeff Crilley Show coming up.